Good crowd. It's a loud crowd. What we lack in number, we make up in noise. It's a good thing. Okay, John chapter 11. This is another of the, there's 7 miracles. There's a number of miracles that Jesus performed, but there are 7 that are specifically highlighted in John's gospel, and this is one of those 7. And I think this is one of my favorite miracles. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. You can have a favorite miracle, but I just like everything about this one, from the circumstances that lead up to it, and the way Jesus, the way he kind of let this situation develop, I think even added to the power of the miracle. But in chapter 11, in verse 1, we read that a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. And then he specifically references in verse 2 what is going to be recorded in chapter 12. That is, it was the Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. You know, we generally associate Mary and Martha, but we don't always put Lazarus with the two of them, but they were siblings. And they also were a family that loved Jesus much, and they were a family of means. And there's some things that are brought out in this chapter that help us to see that. What do you think of when you think of Mary and Martha? Maybe different thoughts, but can anybody relate something that happened during their time between the two of them? Okay.
And Martha complained to Jesus, and Jesus told her that Mary had chosen the better part.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking about. So if you were going to describe Martha's personality versus Mary's personality, how would you describe them? Spiritual and religious, okay. How's that? So Mary would have been the one that you would have said was spiritual, and Martha perhaps the one religious, okay? Is that fair? Okay. So who did Jesus I was being careful how I said that.
I was thinking, though, isn't it kind of neat the way that Martha felt close enough to Jesus to complain to him about her sister? Think about that. They must have been pretty close.
Yeah, they were very close. And that's a good point. You think about in the Old Testament, Moses and the relationship that he had with God. And Moses would complain to God, wouldn't he? And do we see that necessarily as a bad thing?
That was part of Jesus becoming human, was the understanding, and he didn't say, it's okay, Martha, I'll send her in there later. He wanted us to understand that the spiritual part is more important. I don't know that you could fault Martha, though, I would have been Martha. I'm just telling you right now.
Yeah, you would have been Martha.
I would have been in there worried about
Paula would have been Martha.
everybody eating something, and so I can't really fault Martha for that.
Yeah.
I would have thought that Martha, though, was fulfilling the typical female role for the time period, that it would have been their job to take care of all those things, and the others would have been sitting in there. And when Mary goes in there, it's like, that's not where you belong. You belong here doing all the support work.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to kind of look at that because for a couple of reasons. Number one, it just shows us how human they were. They're Bible characters, but Bible characters were just people. And the closeness that they had with Jesus, that they were so close to him that they felt comfortable. Martha and Mary felt comfortable kind of going back and forth over a matter. And as far as that matter, I don't see Mary being any better than Martha, any more spiritual than Martha, maybe in that moment. But in that moment, she made a good choice. She made a good decision, and it was a teaching opportunity for Jesus. Martha seems to be the older one. She seems to be the one who's older and kind of the leader. And typically, when you see that in siblings, the older one generally, not always, tends to be the more responsible one. But again, they're just people. And we can be different people and still show our love for Jesus and have that close relationship with Jesus, that close relationship with God. But this close relationship is really going to come out in this story. And it begins earlier because we see that he remembered, that is John, that it was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Now, this hasn't happened yet as far as the chronology, but John is writing this in the future from this time, so he's looking back and he makes reference to that event, which again we'll read about in chapter 12, the first several verses there. So the sisters sent word to him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. So there was a close relationship between Jesus and Mary and Martha, but there was also a close relationship between Jesus and Lazarus. And so they bring to his attention the fact that their brother is sick, but they identify him as the one whom Jesus loved. So what were they thinking? And I don't think this is a stretch to try to surmise why they sent word to Jesus. They believed that Jesus had the ability to heal the sick. There had also been occasion where Jesus had raised the dead. At this point, Lazarus was not yet dead, but he was sick. And he's sick enough that they sent word to Jesus. But when Jesus heard this, he said, this sickness is not to end in death. And we got to look at that statement because Lazarus is going to die. Did Jesus make a mistake? Did something happen that Jesus was not able to predict? Then why did he say this sickness is not to end in death? But he said it would not end in death. He said this sickness is not to end in death. But it did. He did die. Oh, let's just read what else he said. This sickness is not to end in death, but for the glory of God. The end of this sickness is not death. That's not where this is going to end. He's going to die, but that's not where it's going to end. Where this is going is this is an opportunity to bring glory to God so that the Son of God may be glorified by it. And again, we're just saying what we've said over and over again. God's in control. Jesus knows everything that's going on. He knows everything that's happening. He knows what's in everybody's heart. He knows what's going to happen. And he knows that this is going to be an opportunity, another opportunity for him, not only to prove that he was the Son of God, but to bring glory in the process. Now, Jesus, verse 5, loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. John just keeps bringing that out. The closeness, the relationship. Why does he say that? Why does he tell us that Jesus loved them at this point? Well, let's look at verse 6. So when he heard that he was sick, he then stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. What did the sisters want Jesus to do? Hang around a couple of days to see what would happen? They wanted Jesus to come and heal their brother. Immediately. But he waits 2 days. Why does he wait? How many days was Lazarus in the tomb? 4 days. All right, so we got 2 days that Jesus is waiting. Why the delay? He was probably dead at that point. You're correct. I mean, I agree with your math. Whether you're correct or not, I don't know, but I do agree with your math. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so he stayed 2 days in the place where he was. Then after this, and by the way, the place where he was, we just saw that. But let's jump back into chapter 10 for just a moment. Just because I think this is going to be important as we get toward the end of chapter 11, or at least on into chapter 11. So in verse 39, verse 31 of chapter 10, what did the Jews do? They picked up stones again to stone him. And then in verse 39, they were seeking again to seize him, and he eluded their grasp. And then he went beyond the Jordan to the place where John was first baptizing, and he was staying there. And it was at that place where he got the news about Lazarus being sick. So at this point, we're getting closer and closer to that final Passover when Jesus is going to be put to death. So everything he's doing, every movement is being closely watched. Hopefully, there would be those who were closely watching Jesus who would see this miracle. So this extension of time was, maybe this is not the best way to put it, but it was kind of adding to the drama. It was adding to the effect that the miracle would have upon the people who would be present and see Lazarus raised from the dead. After this, verse 7, he said to the disciples, "Let's go to Judea again." The disciples said to him, and this is why I went back to chapter 10, "Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and are you going there again?" Their concern was, this is not a good place for us to be at this time. Things are really starting to heat up, and yet Jesus is willing to go. Jesus is ready to go, and Jesus says in verse 9, "Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world." I'm going to let these words sink in. "But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him." Now let's think about this. Where have we seen this language before? Where have we seen this before? Where have we seen that? Has anybody in here been in the class on John on Wednesday night? Okay, John 8:12. Read that for us, Nick. Okay, good. Now, where else have we seen it? In the first chapter. It's a theme in the book of John. Where else have we seen it? Just recently. Sometime in the last month in this class. You know, it's got to be one of the chapters we just studied. How about chapter 9? Remember the healing of the man born blind, living in darkness, living in total darkness? Jesus, in response to the question, Rabbi, verse 1, chapter 9, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he would be born blind? Jesus answered, it was neither that this man sinned nor his parents, but it was so that the works of God might be displayed in him. That's very similar, is it not, to what Jesus said about this sickness is not to end in death, but it's to end in the glory of God. He wasn't born blind because of his sickness. He was born blind so that I could now perform a miracle and bring glory to God. And then he says in John chapter 9 and verse 4, we must work the works of him who sent me as long as it is day. You see the similar language? Night is coming when no one can work. While I'm in the world, I am the light of the world. Jesus brings light and he dispels darkness. He will perform a miracle for the benefit of a man who had spent his life in darkness. And he will see not only physically, but he will see spiritually, and he will see that Jesus is the light of the world that illuminates and brings life to man. So Jesus is stressing that point again here in chapter 11 and verse 9. What about this idea, though, about let's work while it's day because the night's coming? What do you think he's communicating there to his disciples? Let's work while it's light before the night gets here. By the way, are there 12 hours in the day? Okay? Yeah, generally there are 12 hours in the day. So does that mean we should work 12 hours? Be okay? So what's the spiritual application? And Matt's touched upon it. I'm here, I'm working. What did he say about his work in an earlier chapter? Who's working? Who's doing whose work? He's doing his Father's work. So God continues to work. God is going to be glorified. Again, verse 4, the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified by it. They're working in unison. They're working together. And as long as Jesus is here, he will continue to work. I think there's a lesson for us. As long as we are here, we need to continue to work. We need to continue to work for the Lord. Yeah. John, in his first letter, in his subsequent epistles, places emphasis upon this concept of light. This he said, verse 11, and after that he said to them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep. But I go so that I may awaken him out of sleep. What's everybody thinking? And if he's real sick, if he's sleeping, what about that? It's a good thing, isn't it? Sometimes the best cure for sickness is sleep. Just sleep it off. So if he's sleeping, this sounds like things are getting better. But we know that he's dead. So the disciples did understand it that way. The disciples then said to him in verse 12, Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he'll recover. He's going to wake up. Now, Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought that he was speaking of literal sleep. So Jesus then said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, so that you may believe, but let us go to him. We know what he's going to do. We understand what he was saying when he said, I'm glad I wasn't there so that you may believe. We know what he's going to do, but they didn't. They didn't. Therefore, Thomas, who is called Didymus, verse 16, said to his fellow disciples, let us also go so that we may die with him. Die with who? Yeah, he just said that Lazarus is dead, but Thomas has said, let's go so we can die with him. But what had they said earlier when Jesus said, let's go to Judea? We can't go there. They were just trying to stone you. Well, if they're going to kill you, they're going to kill us. What is commendable about Thomas' statement? He's ready to die. He sees that this thing is not going to end well. He believes in Jesus, and he's willing to follow Jesus, even if it takes him to death. So when Jesus came, he found that he had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now, Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary. What have we said about the phrase, the Jews? Who are these people? And don't say Jews. They're who? Religious leaders, enemies, generally. Now, there may have been some who were teetering in belief and not really sure where they were at, but in general, when John uses the word Jews, you can pretty much assume that he's referring to the enemies of Jesus. But these enemies of Jesus were also friends of Lazarus, Mary, and Martha, because they had come to Mary and Martha to console them concerning their brother. So they weren't disassociating or disconnecting themselves from Lazarus, Mary, and Martha just because of their association with Jesus. But they're going to be there to see this. Martha, therefore, now who is Martha? She's the cook. Okay? She's the cooker and the cleaner. Martha, therefore, when she heard that Jesus was coming, went to meet him. But Mary stayed at the house. Martha then said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Mary's going to say the same thing. That's why they sent for Jesus. That's why they wanted Jesus there. Because they knew if he were there, he would heal Lazarus. Even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. All right, let's play with that a little bit. Was Martha thinking that Jesus was going to raise Lazarus from the dead? Careful before you answer. Be able to support your answer. She knew that he could. Pardon me? So he had not raised the dead before? Yeah. What did she say when Jesus said, roll away the stone? He's been dead for 4 days. He's going to be smelling. Did she expect him to be walking out? I mean, if she really believed that Jesus was going to raise him, and yes, she did believe in the resurrection, but I think if she really believed Jesus was going to raise him, she would not have been concerned about the smell when Jesus said to roll it away. So similar to the blind man, which the blind man traveled a much greater distance in the development of his faith, because remember, he began by just saying, this man Jesus. That was his assessment of Christ, this man Jesus. She already believed in Jesus. She believed that he was the Messiah, the Christ, but she didn't necessarily believe that he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead. And you know, Jesus didn't just go around healing everybody, did he? He didn't just go around raising all of the dead. Death was a part of life, and Martha and Mary would certainly have understood that. Brother Thompson, you have a comment.
To see them
Yeah. That's a good thought. A lot of trouble, but a good thought. Yeah. All right, so she said to him, yes, Lord. Well, go back, verse 25. Jesus said, let's go back to 23. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. So again, I don't necessarily believe she was thinking that he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead, but she did know he was going to be resurrected. Now, how would she know that? Did Jesus ever say anything about that? Yes, he did. John chapter 5. Look at John chapter 5, verse 28. And I want you to notice what Jesus said and apply it to what he's about to do. John 5 and verse 28, do not marvel at this, for an hour is coming in which all who are in the tombs will hear his voice and will come forth, those who did the good deeds to a resurrection of life, those who committed the evil deeds to a resurrection of judgment. Now that's obviously a reference to the end of time. But notice the words here. There's going to come a point when all who are in the tomb will hear his voice and will come forth. Think about how this miracle was performed. Jesus said, Lazarus, come forth. He heard Jesus' voice, and he was raised and came out of the tomb. So here is a proof in time, not at the end of time, but a proof in time that what Jesus said would take place at the end of time would happen, and that the power was in God to make this happen. Any comments or questions at this point? So Jesus said to her back in chapter 11, verse 25, I am the resurrection and the life. Here's something else, a theme in the Gospel of John. Not only that Jesus was light, but also he was life. And he was the resurrection. He was the source of the resurrection. He who believes in me will live even if he dies. Now, what did he teach the crowd that had ate of the loaves and the fishes that turned them away? He taught them that if you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you will live forever. Well, they will live forever as they become one with Jesus through their faith, and they will someday be raised to walk, to live in eternity. Everyone who lives and believes in me, verse 26, will never die. Do you believe this? Again, you just got to marvel at how Jesus so masterfully taught his lessons, because here is one who had died. We're all going to die. But he says, if you believe in me, you will never die. You will never die spiritually. So when a saint, when they take their last breath, what's going on and what's not going on? There's the death of the physical body, but the spirit lives. The spirit continues. The soul lives. She said to him, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, even he who comes into the world. It doesn't get any better than that. That's what you need to know. That's what you need to know. And she was there even before she saw her brother raised. When she had said this, she went away and called Mary, her sister, saying secretly, the teacher is here and is calling for you. I like the way she calls him teacher. You know, she had just confessed that he was the Christ, the Son of God, but what stuck in her mind the most was not the miracles, not even the claim that he made for himself, but the illumination, the light that he brought through his teaching and his parables and the lessons that he presented about God and himself and about what's most important in life. And when she heard it, she got up quickly and was coming to him. Now, Jesus had not yet come into the village, so he's still outside where everyone's gathered, but was still in the place where Martha met him. Then the Jews who were with her in the house and consoling her When they saw that Mary got up quickly and went out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. So Jesus was already close to the tomb because she was going in that direction, and they assumed that she was going to the tomb. Therefore, when Mary came where Jesus was, she saw him and fell at his feet, said the same thing that Martha said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. And he said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." And Jesus wept. Why was Jesus deeply moved in spirit and troubled? Why did Jesus weep? And there can be more than one answer to this question. He loved Lazarus. He loved Lazarus. He loved his family. What else? So, sometimes you just cry when other people cry. Okay? Okay? He was human. He was God in the flesh, but he was human. What else? I think that's the heart of the matter. I think that's what was going through his mind. And let's consider this, okay? And you alluded to it. It's stated in Revelation, but it's also stated in 1 Corinthians 15. What is 1 Corinthians 15 about? Resurrection. Resurrection of the body. We talked about this Sunday. 1 Corinthians 15 is about the resurrection. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 26, we see, well, let's look at verse 25. He must reign until he has put all his enemies under his feet, and the last enemy that will be abolished is what? Death. Jesus was in the presence of the enemy. He was in the presence of death. Why did Lazarus die? Yeah. It wasn't just because he was sick. It was because of the sin that took place in the Garden of Eden. And it was because of the temptation that Satan, who is the enemy of God, put before Adam and Eve that caused the sin that led to their death. So Jesus is, I see this as him being deeply moved in spirit and troubled because he was in the presence of the enemy. It went beyond just the love that he had for his friend, even though I think that was a huge part of it. Lori?
I hope this will make sense. One of the saddest things to me in my whole life that I can tell you about, and I've talked to Rachel about this before, is when my children went from little children to understanding things that would allow them to lose their innocence. Okay? So as a mother, it just created such sorrow and pain in me. And when Jesus sees what people go through on the earth that hurts them so deeply, he can sympathize with that.
Yeah.
That may not be exactly the right emotion, but Jesus didn't have to worry about us being raised. He knew that could happen. But for humans to go through what you go through on the earth, he understood that, and he sympathized with it, and I feel like that was part of the groaning, was that death, sin, all of that, when you become aware of it, it's so painful.
Yeah, well, and I get your point, too, about that's what we're seeing in our kids when they reach the age of accountability, when they pass from that innocence into that, well, now he or she's just like one of us. Yeah.
And the sorrow and
And that's hard.
that goes with it, yeah.
Yeah, it's real hard. Good. Okay, so the Jews, when Jesus wept, so the Jews were saying in verse 36, see how he loved him. So that's what they saw. But some of them said, could not this man, and this is why I say there was a mix in this number of Jews, because this is somewhat of a criticism, could not this man who opened the eyes of the blind man, remember that a couple of chapters ago, have kept this man also from dying? Why didn't he? Is he really who he claimed to be? Did the miracle really happen? The Pharisees questioned whether or not he was actually made to see. Maybe he wasn't made to see. Maybe that was a fraud. Okay, well, let's just add to this drama. So Jesus, again, being deeply moved within, came to the tomb. Now it was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. And Jesus said, remove the stone. Martha, the sister of the deceased, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be a stench, for he has been dead 4 days. Jesus said to her, did I not say to you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they removed the stone. Then Jesus raised his eyes, and he said, he prays, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. So something's already going on in that tomb. What is it? Lazarus is waiting for that stone to be rolled away. Can you put yourself in his shoes for a minute? Where am I? You know, you see these horror stories where in movies where people are buried alive and they come back to life, and well, you know, he's kind of experiencing that. But then all of a sudden he sees this little crack of light coming through as that stone's being rolled away. Jesus had prayed that God would raise him. And now he thanks God that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, verse 42, but because of the people standing around, I said it so that they may believe that you sent me. He's praying out loud, not for his benefit, but for the benefit of those who are present. So they hear him thanking God for raising Lazarus, and they know it's the power of God at work in the Son of God. When he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice. Again, note the similarity between this and the end of time. He cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And the man who had died came forth, bound hand and foot with wrappings. This is the day of the living dead. He's walking out. He looks like a zombie. And his face was wrapped around with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, unbind him and let him go. Therefore, many of the Jews who came to Mary and saw what he had done believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them the things which Jesus had done. We know the response of the Pharisees, but why did they do that? Are they trying to make believers out of the Pharisees? Possibly, but more likely not. What do you think they were trying to do, Richard? They're snitching, aren't they? That's right. These are people who are going to go tell the religious leaders what Jesus had just done. There was an expectation that something was going to happen to Jesus the next time he came to Judea. So they're just going to see. They're going to see what they can stir up. Therefore, verse 47, the chief priests and the Pharisees convened a council, and they were saying, what are we doing? For this man is performing many signs. We need to believe in him. We need to believe that he's the Son of God. He's proving his claims that he is the Messiah. No, that's not where the conversation goes. If we let him go on like this, all men will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. Now we know. Now we know what's really of concern to them. Now we know what really matters most. It's their position. It's their glory. It's their place in life. That's what was important. And they're even admitting, are they not, that he's performed miracles? They would not have been willing to take this action or that concerned if they didn't believe in the miracles. Richard?
All the things that he done, as far as opening the eyes of the blind, healing the sick, and all this, that is wonderful. That is great, that is a great miracle. But when he does this, when he raises Lazarus from the dead, that's all. That's it. They can't stand it more. They've got to do away with it.
Yeah.
This is a miracle beyond their imagination.
Good. Preach it. Richard? Well, that's good, man. Bring it up. Bring it. All right, so one of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all, nor do you take into account that it is expedient for you that one man die for the people." It's expedient. And that the whole nation not perish. Now, he did not say this on his own initiative, but being high priest that year, he prophesied. So God was guiding his words. This was God in control again to bring about the sacrifice that was necessary for the sins of the world. And die not only for the nation, verse 52, but in order that he may also gather together into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. So in his words, he's bringing about the very thing that he wants to prevent. So from that day on, they planned together to kill him. Bringing into one the children of God who are scattered abroad, that's the bringing together, bringing into the flock, as Jesus talked about in John chapter 10, when he said that he was the good shepherd. It's bringing in the Gentiles, so that the Jews and the Gentiles would be one in Christ. Okay, comments or questions? We'll stop there and begin verse 54 and then move into chapter 12 next week.
Do you think Lazarus ever looked at death the same way again?
No, I don't. And did he fear death? I think if I could be anybody in the New Testament during the time of Christ, I'd want to be Lazarus. Wouldn't you? You want to be Mary? Would you want to be Martha, Richard? No, I'm just kidding. Yes, do you have a comment?
Do you don't think Christ knew when he raised Lazarus from the dead, according to the way he
Do I think Christ knew that? I think Christ knew everything.
He knew when he done that would be, that would be.
Good.
I think it's something that at night, every time we go to sleep, we're not aware what happens over 8 hours of our lives every night. So like, that's basically the same thing as Lazarus' spirit.
Yeah. And yeah, that's good. Okay, appreciate your comments.